Funny. Wieder genau da, wo ich vorher auch war.
Probier mal den ersten Link.
Den habe ich ja eben probiert. Das
Yorgos Karevas, aged 52, was shot by contract killers near his home in Athens last week, Friday. Yorgos Karevas was an investigative reporter researching organized crime and corruption. Before we start, I ask you for a moment of silence, a moment to commemorate him and send a sign of solidarity to his family, to his friends, and to his colleagues. Thank you. The audience, journalists, politicians, activists, welcome to the Uncovered conference organized by the European Center for Press and Media Freedom in cooperation with the International Press Institute in Vienna and the European Journalism Center. These three organizations run the IJ4EU grant. Today's conference is one element of this project. It is financed by the European Commission and co-financed by Frit Ord, OSF, Luminate, and the city of Leipzig. My name is Lutz Kinkel. I'm ECPMF's Managing Director. IJ4EU is a grant focusing on cross-border investigative journalism in the EU and candidate states. In this second project period of the grant, more than €1 million was handed in for investigations, more than €1 million. This grant and the journalists working with it create a truly European public sphere. They, the grantees, enable us, the citizens, to discuss what matters in Europe. This is how we can relate to Europe and the EU, and this is how we can understand the mutual dependence of these nations gathered in the EU. The agenda of this conference is threefold. Firstly, we are here to perceive and discuss the stories and scandals unearthed by the grantees. Secondly, we will confer the new Impact Award for outstanding investigative achievements in a ceremony this evening. Thirdly, we will reflect on the conditions of cross-border investigative journalism in Europe. After this welcome, we will start with the first panel, and probably it's not surprising that the first panel deals straight with money, means with funding. The host of this conference is former CNN moderator Ali Aslan. I will introduce him later. If you have any technical question, please don't hesitate to contact also our staff via chat. I'm now pleased to hand over for a short welcome by our IJ4EU partners. Here's Catherine Giles, Director Grants Program at the European Journalism Center, and Barbara Trionfi, IPI's Executive Director. First of all, Catherine, welcome. The floor is yours. Okay, Catherine is obviously not with us in the moment. Maybe I can turn to Barbara Trionfi, please, from IPI.
Hi. Sorry. Thank you so much, Lutz. I hope you can hear me and see me. Yeah, so as Lutz mentioned, we are coming to an end of a project period which has been extremely successful, and one of the unique aspects of the IJ4EU program is that not only it wasn't disrupted at all by the COVID-19 pandemic, but rather the opposite, that it gained in importance and relevance, specifically in these most difficult times for journalism. In just its second year of operation, the IJ4EU Fund, under IPI's leadership, in cooperation with our partners ECPMF and EJC, has succeeded in establishing itself as a highly credible and trusted source of funding for cross-border investigative journalism in Europe. And we are very proud to have supported so many incredible investigations over the past year. Investigations that have been tackling some of the most pressing topics of the moment and generating high quality public debate with public debate with the power to affect really policies on the issues facing the European unions and its citizens these days. So many of these investigations will be highlighted over the course of this conference, and I very much look forward to also hearing more from the journalists about them. We are also very proud of the fact that the grant giving model that we have developed for IJ4EU allows journalists across Europe to pursue the kind of complex, time-consuming investigations that are harder than ever today, given the upheaval of the past year, and yet so important these days. The coronavirus pandemic, as mentioned, has not only created a new financial threat to independent media, but you know, the immense social, political, and financial changes that we are seeing these days demand a journalism that more than ever is able to be the eyes and the ears of the public and exercise its watchdog role. So we knew that it was essential to help provide the resources for this type of journalism to be possible. So I'm so glad that the IJ4EU was really able to meet the moment in achieving this. But more broadly, if you want, the funding model of the IJ4EU contributes to the sustainability of the independent media by channeling public and philanthropic money into high quality watchdog journalism without compromising the editorial independence. And this aspect has been key to the success of the IJ4EU fund and very much appreciated by our grantees. As Lutz said, IPI has overseen a program that awarded almost 1.1 million in grants in 2020 and allowing over 260 journalists from every EU member states and candidate country to pursue cross-border journalistic projects in the public interest. In total, we have funded or contributed to fund 49 projects, and that is out of the several hundreds of teams that have applied for funds, which shows the immense need that there is for this type of work. Many of the IJ4EU investigations have already achieved also great public resonance and have been published in some of Europe's leading media, as well as smaller independent media in every country of the European Union, which underscores really our commitment to supporting the free and pluralistic media environment in Europe. And we are also very proud that of the comprehensive support that the program has been able to give to the grantees. And as a consortium, IPI, EJC, and ECPMF, we have been able to offer editorial support, training, and legal support throughout the investigation and publication period, which has been also key to the success of these projects. I'll be pasting soon a link in the chat box to the page of the project, and I really encourage you to have a look at some of the stories that have been published under this project, which are really impressive, and you'll see the unique value of cross-border journalism in this context. Finally, I would like to join Lutz in thanking the donors that have made these achievements possible and that also trusted our model. A special thank also goes to the jury member, all the jury members of the investigation support scheme in particular, which was led by the Süddeutsche Zeitung editor-in-chief Wolfgang Krach, which have done an admirable and very difficult work in selecting the projects. But most of all, I really would like to congratulate the journalistic teams for their work. The range and depth of the stories published is spectacular, and it underscores the what really investigative journalism is all about and what it can achieve. I'm certainly looking forward today and tomorrow to delve deeper into why investigative journalism is a public good and why it must be supported. In sharing the best practices and learning more about the work done in the course of the last year by the IJ4EU grantees. And once again, I would like to thank ECPMF for organizing this important conference. Thank you. Back to you, Lutz.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Catherine is still not with us. I don't know, maybe she has a technical problem. This is why it was possible for you to speak a little bit longer and give a comprehensive oversight of what the IJ4EU is all about. Thank you very much again, Barbara. Maybe we can come back to Catherine later if she's there. For now, I will turn now to the first panel. As I said, it deals, and this is not surprising, with funding and money. It's about funding cross-border investigative journalism. As you all know, the conditions for journalistic investigations in Europe, and Barbara already mentioned that, are worsening year by year. One factor is the general decline of press and media freedom caused by authoritarianism and accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic is misused by some governments to further restrict access to information and also to criminalize journalistic research. The other factor is the ongoing economic weakness of the sector that is also accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic. The drop in advertising revenues in the year 2020 is dramatic. And there are governments like in Poland and in Hungary that weaponize this situation to financially try out the last remaining critical media outlets. Investigative journalism itself is the supreme discipline of journalism. It delivers new insights, it delivers new ways of thinking, it holds the powerful to account. However, sometimes, and well, I spent 20 years in journalism. Sometimes it takes years to get a story done, and sometimes it takes years to find out that the trace is cold. Investigative journalism is costly. Investigative journalism is painstaking, and it is time-consuming. This is why publishing houses tend to reduce their investigative departments. And this is why we need to talk about funding if we want to keep this specific element among the checks and balances of our democracies alive. Welcome to our panel on funding cross-border journalism in Europe. First of all, I would like to speak to two speakers that I will introduce now. All in all, we have 5 speakers. I would ask the first 2 speakers to turn on now their camera. I'm happy to welcome Sabine Verheyen, who is head of the Culture Committee in the European Parliament. Mrs. Verheyen belongs to the European People's Party. She is German and was, before entering the European Parliament, mayor of the city of Aachen. So she knows very well the relationship also between journalists and politicians. Welcome, Sabine.
Hello.
The second speaker is Anna Herold, head of the unit of audiovisual media policy at the European Commission. Mrs. Herold is former member of the cabinet of former Commissioner Günther Oettinger. Welcome, Anna.
Hello.
She can hear us. Wonderful. Mrs. Verheyen, the first question goes directly to you. IJ4EU is a project that was born in the European Parliament. I think it was back in 2014. One of the drivers behind it was Benedek Javor. Back then he was a member of the Green Party. And I think it was not by accident that he comes from Hungary, right? What do you remember of these early days and the reasons to start this project?
We had difficult situations in many of our European countries when it came to investigative journalism. The question of media freedom was already raised, and years later we had the situation also in Malta. When you take a look to the situation in Romania, when it comes to the situation for journalists in Slovenia, Slovakia, and Czech Republic, the Visegrad, Hungary, like Hungary and Poland, we got more and more the situation that especially investigative journalism was politically under threat, but also the situation in the press, in the media environment as such, got more and more difficult for the investigative units with the media. Because also the income, not just because of COVID-19, but also the income in general, because of digitization, less revenues coming out of this of selling of media or press products, printed products, that all the whole switch we had and shift we had in the media scene with digitization and several other issues made a very difficult situation, especially for investigative journalism. That was the reason why the Parliament said very clear, we have to do something. There must be an initiative to support investigative journalism. And in 2017, in the end, the European Parliament initiated the special fund to be spent exclusively on cross-border investigative journalism. And I think that is where we have the first fruits now with the project that will be presented today and also this evening in the ceremony. So what did we do? We wanted to fund the grant via the European Commission's through the European Centre of Press and Media Freedom, the ECPMF, which is based in Leipzig. We already heard about that from Barbara, as well as the Norwegian Fritt Ord Foundation, which provided an additional 25,000 euros. The grants were administered by the International Press Institute, the IPI, which is based in Vienna, and the projects operate fully independently from IPI and ECPMF and the European Commission and other IG4EU partners, because it is important that investigative journalism stays independent. It is not somehow linked to institutions or organizations. The fund currently disperses a maximum of 450,000 euro in one founding round per year. So the single grants are between 5,000 and 50,000 euros. And IG4EU covers 70%.
Mrs. Verheyen, it's 1 million this year. This year it's 1 million.
Was 1 million. No, I just came up.
In the first round, it was 450,000.
Exactly. So you ask how it started, and so I wanted to come up with this. Meanwhile, we have done a lot more. There is much more money in the budgets now, and what we also want to do is to go forward with the program. Because it is important in the situation we have at the moment when it comes to investigative journalism, that we do something from the public side, and not in that sense that we just want to promote this journalistic work that is pleasant for us as politicians or as governments, but we want to have this independent investigative journalism, because it's one of the columns of a functioning democracy. Without this, we don't have the watchdog function anymore. If you just make copy and paste from messages you get from all over the world, but not have the capacity, the financial and also the personal capacity to have investigative journalism, it will be to the detriment of functioning democracies. And that is why the Parliament is supporting this very, very strongly with different actions, not just via these funds, via these projects, but also via other initiatives that will come up in the next months and years.
Thank you so much. I saw Anna Herold nodding, and this means we are all practically on the same page when it comes to this program, right, Anna?
Yes, indeed. We are extremely grateful for the European Parliament for initiating this particular funding project. And I think it is, in a way, a model of how public funding can help independent media and independent journalism that I think you and Barbara already, quite eloquently described the situation in which independent media and journalism are finding themselves today. And all the negative trends that we have seen in the past have been only exacerbated by the pandemic, as you have also all mentioned. So I think we are extremely proud of the fact that we have managed to put in place, again, at the initiative of the Parliament, a project where this full independence of the media is ensured. This has been already explained by Barbara, and this has been obviously the initial idea of the European Parliament, to show that it is possible to fund media by having this total arm's length approach, and not intervening in any way into the selection of the actual projects, the journalistic projects, these great examples of journalistic collaboration and this difficult field of investigative journalism are. I think it is also an excellent example of what the role of these pilot projects and preparatory actions and the important role of the Parliament plays in helping the Commission in policy conception, because this whole idea is indeed that we try out funding in new areas that hopefully then find way of more stable funding in programs, which is in a way happening as we speak, because projects like the one we are talking today about, this editorial collaboration between media outlets and other journalists and other partners in the news media sector, will be part of the funding that we will set up in the under the cross-sectoral strand of the new program of Creative Europe that will start soon. So I think that both from the way the project has been set up, but also in a way the impact it has on the policy conception and development, where funding, independent funding of investigative journalism flows into the general policy of the EU, shows that I think we can really be proud of what has been.
Anna, you already mentioned the multi-annual financial framework, 2021 to 2027, and the Creative Europe program, the cross-sectoral strand. This means, when I got you right, that you will continue funding investigative journalism under this umbrella in the future. Is there also a possibility that the means, or the financial means, will be even increased in comparison?
We will have, I think, quite the positive development, in a way, stepping up efforts. Again, on the one hand, thanks to the European Parliament, and on the other hand, thanks to these new possibilities under the cross-sectoral strand. Because as Mr. Hayen already mentioned, there will be new projects. The European Parliament has asked, for example, for the following year, to implement new funding for investigative journalism, also in view of the kind of emergency needs that the sector is facing due to the pandemic. So just one example that I can quote. So we will continue funding certain pilot projects and preparatory actions at the request of the European Parliament. And at the same time, we will be living this transition period of the new program that indeed under this strand will foresee calls for collaborative news partnerships, where editorial collaboration could also be part of these projects. So there will be, let's say, more opportunities, even if we compare the situation to the, let's say, to the previous years, no, that have that anyway prepared the ground for this development.
Thank you for giving this perspective, yeah, Ms. Verheyen.
You know that we increased the budget for the whole Creative Europe program and also for the media program. So the expectation from Parliament side is that the Commission will spend more money in the end also for these things, because there is nearly a doubling of the budget compared to the old program. In total, there are also new ideas what to support and how to come forward. But I think especially to support investigative journalism is one of the core tasks we should concentrate also on, to build up and set up a public sphere on the European level, where member states start to fail more and more. You know that we also made a special committee on disinformation. And I think also there we have the special role of investigative journalism to find out what's really the case in some points, because propaganda, disinformation plays a more and more important role in our everyday life, and so we have to set something against. And that is also a good functioning and well-financed investigative journalism. That's the reason why we expect as Parliament that the Commission will spend more and give more opportunities, like I said. But also out of the recovery fund, we were very sad about that the member states did not allow the Commission and the Parliament to make stricter rules for implementing the 700 billion, because we would like to see the member states to invest also money out of these programs for is implemented and spent in the right way, in the way not just the member states would like to see it, but especially when it comes to media, to keep an eye that this money reaches really the independent media sphere in the member states, and not just the media that is, let's say, accepted and liked by the government. I think that's not the aim we want to reach with the funding, and that's the reason why we will take a very careful look on the implementation. We will make also implementation reports on this, really to take a look: is the money used for the right things, or is there something where we have to call back and have to bring situations to the discussions in the Parliament again, or even have the possibility to stop the payments when the money is not spent correctly. We have now, with the new instruments, the possibility with the rule of law mechanism, and I hope that we will really use it when the situation is there.
Anna, would you like to add something here?
Ms. Verheyen has already, I think, been extremely clear about it. There is a great degree of control, and of course, first the member states have to submit to the Commission, their plans. We are extremely vigilant and agree also on a performance framework with the member states, but. And there surely will be possibilities and for safeguards for a possible misuse. But if I may, the concern that we are having now is actually not so much this, because there is so far it's very little at all from the member states on the support for the culture and creative sectors in their recovery plans. So we are extremely keen on seeing more on this in general. So I think that this is also another aspect that we should not forget in this discussion, because while we know that we have the 20% target for digital, and Ms. Verheyen has already expressed her views on the fact that we don't have anything specific for cultural sectors, as such, unfortunately. Still within the 20%, we would be very happy to see support to the media. However, this is not necessarily what we are seeing. So I think that these two aspects have to be balanced out, and also we have to be frank with each other. It is not through the implementation of these recovery plans that we will be able to counter the developments that you have been mentioning, Lutz. So of course the Commission is considering what it could do more in this area to safeguard independence and media freedom in all the member states.
Thank you very much. Now the time is already running out. I would have liked to discuss the media action plan that the Commission also set up. I can only tell you, the audience, to look it up. There is comprehensive material also in the web that would show you all the aspects of the media action plan. There are a lot of interesting aspects in it. For example, that there will be a new software that it will make more easy to find funding, EU funding, and also to apply for EU funding. This is something that hopefully everybody can use also to get a better access. And also, I want to recommend to you the News Media Forum. The first News Media Forum conference already took place now in spring. It was dedicated to the protection of journalists. The second News Media Forum will take place in autumn, and it will be dedicated to funding and to financing and to the media industry. Also extremely interesting and valuable. Thank you very much for the moment, Anna Herold and Sabine Verheyen. I would like to ask now the private donors and funders to enter the stage. This is the second round of the talk. Each speaker stands for an organization that is already connected with investigative journalism because they support the IJ4EU grant. Please welcome with me Kitty von Bertele, Principal at Luminate and managing the organization's grants in Western Europe. Welcome with me Audrey Urick, Program Specialist for Investigative Journalism at Open Society Foundations, and an adventurer. You may have a look at his videos where he's describing his trips through Latin America, which are very amazing. And last not least, Knut Olaf Amas, the director of Fritt Ord. The foundation is based in Oslo, Norway. I hope please, if you turn on all your cameras, Kitty, Audrey, and Knut, and then we can start. I see now Kitty von Bertele. Welcome. And I would start directly with you, Kitty. you are representing Luminate here. I went a little bit through the lists of organizations that Luminate is already supporting. We see a lot of well-known organizations among them, like CPJ, MLDI, Reporters Without Borders, a European Journalism Center. You also support outlets that produce, let's say, public interest media, and investigative journalism, among them the Bureau of Investigative Journalism and also the German Korrektiv, which is located in Berlin. Would you also accept single persons as grantees or group of freelancers that follow and pursue a certain project, or do you only and exclusively work together with already established organizations?
Thank you, Lutz, and for the question. And the previous speakers. I found it really interesting to hear about and think about how this program kicked off. And I'm also taking away a resolution to figure out how to be introduced as an adventurer at the beginning of a panel session. Maybe in answer to your question, it's helpful to, I don't know how much the audience here will know about Luminate. So just as a brief introduction, we're one of the philanthropic organizations set up by Pierre Omidyar, who founded eBay. So it's his money that we spend on a range of different areas in about 18 or 19 countries around the world. And independent media is a big area of focus for us. As Lutz has said, we have a large portfolio of grantees in that area. And the question about whether we support outlets or freelance journalists, independent journalists is, I mean, it's a tricky one because there's no hard and fast rule to it. But given the sort of position we play and the objectives we have for a strong, thriving market for investigative journalism, for good media, sort of journalism as a public good, and we're also really interested in models to make sure that is sustainable, right? To make sure that it can continue to thrive. We have tended to focus our funding, therefore, on institutions that surround that, because we want there to be strong and functioning institutions. We believe a lot in giving core support and core funding to journalism organizations who are undertaking investigations. I fully appreciate that journalism organizations rely heavily on individuals and freelancers. So one thing is, like, we would always want to make sure that any organization we're funding pays freelancers properly and has the space and scope to do that. And as you said, we give support to bodies that offer protections or legal support or some of that sort of infrastructure to freelance journalists and individuals as well. I think for us, it's difficult to think about funding people specifically because, well, there's various reasons. One, it's hard to do and hard to think about how to balance that, and we have a generous budget, but our funding is not limitless, and so there's a sort of a call that needs to be made at some stage about what the most effective funding mechanisms are to make sure independent journalism, investigative journalism can thrive. And also, we don't want to fund specific investigations. We don't want to have sort of any editorial engagement. We want to make sure that the organizations we fund are able to pursue stories totally independently of, which is why we focus really heavily on giving core support and building the sort of capacity and infrastructure for those investigations to happen. And I can't quite think through how a funder like us would fund individual journalists without getting a bit more involved in the specific direction of investigations. So I'm really interested in getting more money into the sector. I think as a funder, we take our role as a fundraiser also very seriously, building sort of more capacity, working with funders who don't currently fund journalism to bring them in. I do a lot of work on the environment for public benefit journalism, for investigative journalism, and trying to think about what the regulatory environment is that could enable more funders to come into this space, because it's poorly funded. That's why the European Commission support is a really interesting sort of model to think about. And a colleague of mine at Luminate is also working on an international fund for public interest media, which is a huge push to raise more money from across the world to support journalism. So there are different mechanisms by which we think about how to get money to the kind of journalism and the kind of journalists you're talking about, but it's probably a bit far off for us to be able to fund individuals.
Luminate concentrates, as you said, well, on organizations and institutions, and they say what we can also read on your homepage: don't call us, we call you. This is now my wording. You say, and when I put it in your words, we do not currently accept unsolicited applications. What does that mean in practice? How can people get in touch with you and probably pitch for their projects? How is that possible?
Yeah, it's a good point to raise, and there is, as far as I have seen it, no perfect model for how a funder can be open and sort of invite the widest possible ideas and exposure, and also within the capacity we have, manage the kind of floods of applications you would get. So the way it works in practice is we do a lot of sort of scanning of the landscape of what is out there, what exists. Once we've started funding organizations, that obviously broadens our network and we get to see more work and more things that are happening. So it's quite organic, which is quite an unsatisfactory answer to give, I guess. The one advantage is that we don't have a sort of we don't have funding round and application processes, so we can fund quite nimbly. We can fund on a rolling basis throughout the year, but it's it's not. I appreciate it's not that transparent how to get in touch with us. I mean, I would be really happy to share my email address for people to reach out to. I can put that in the chat box. I will do that in the spirit of transparency. I will also, in the spirit of that transparency, say we don't have limitless capacity, and to the point I was saying in the answer to your first question, there are ways in which we fund and models that we look for and prefer. But if I give my email address, I'm happy for people to be in touch, and I can let you know really quickly whether the work you're doing is within scope or interest. I'm very happy to give quick, fast feedback on whether something is within our strategy or not.
Thank you, Kitty. That is really very kind of you, and we are happy to post your email address also in the chat. And yeah, thank you for your remarks on that. I have to apologize that I didn't introduce you as an adventurer. I know that you worked in several positions for governments also. I guess this was adventurous, but I didn't find anything that you talked about this experience. And yeah, if you want to make a documentary about your background experience at the governments, I think this could also be an adventure. So thank you for that. Now we come to Audrey. Audrey represents the Open Society Foundation. Like Luminate, you're also in contact with a lot of well-known organizations. You are currently restructuring the complete program of OSF. With regard to the COVID-19 pandemic. What does that mean for funding and to support journalism and media freedom? Will the budgets grow because the sector is so heavily affected? Or do you have different priorities now and for the next years?
Yeah, thanks, Lux, for inviting me. And I think, supporting investigative journalism is adventure in itself, for sure. So in terms of our restructuring, it's not just because of COVID-19. So the OSF is going right now, for people that are not aware of it, through one of the biggest transformation in a decade or perhaps 2 decades. So it's, as the world around us has changed, also the foundation wants to adjust to this new reality. So the change is much more profound at OSF than just because of COVID. COVID certainly is one of the factors. And as we are going through this transformation, we're not completely at the end of it, so we don't know exactly how it's going to look at the end. Of course, we in the journalism program believe that investigative journalism will remain a strong part even in the transformed OSF, but we're still going through it. Regardless, the transformation is coming not because there is any sort of financial constraints on us. So in any case, as in any transformation, there's going to be people that we're going to continue with and people that we perhaps will not. But because the problems or the change is not coming from not having enough funds, we will certainly have enough TILE funds and be able to kind of end the relationship in a kind of responsible way and have the conversations with people that we need to have at the moment. And as I said, we hope that investigative journalism has shown how important it is and continues to be important for all the work that OSF really does. A lot of the successes that civil society had over the past decade has been based on investigations. So we believe we should come at the end of this with the strong support of investigative journalism, but we'll have to wait for the outcome of this transformation.
Okay, we are very interested and keen on this information. It's highly important also for this audience that we have here at the conference. OSF has also a program for individuals, and you have a lot of scholarships and fellowships. Is there something around these scholarships and fellowships that you would specifically recommend to investigative journalists?
Yeah, so OSF does have a fellowship and scholarship programs, but they're typically not focused on developed countries or the countries that are or individuals that are within European Union. I think one of the things that I would recommend and that OSF has been supporting for the past decade is applying to funding to organization like Journalism Fund. I mean, we've been supporting them. They've really been pioneers in supporting this sort of work for over a decade, and we've been there with them from the beginning. So I think that's one of the sources. And similarly to Luminate, we don't support individual investigative journalists, but through something like Journalism Fund, there is an opportunity to apply for the funds through them. And
Thank you.
And of course, we also have a global grantees such as GIJ, and they do not provide financial support to journalists, but there is a lot of resources for investigative journalism. And if you go to GIJN.org website that they have, and they're one of our grantees as well, and we believe the resources are very valuable, although they do not provide financial resources.
Yeah, you're talking about capacity building and trainings and all that. Thank you very much. Last not least, I come to Knut Olaf Ammers, the director of FreeOrd. FreeOrd is based in Oslo, and I also went through the list of beneficiaries. I saw that you support also you have a lot of small grants as well that are dedicated then to journalism and to professional journalism, to article series and so on. And a lot of these small grants go to journalists in Norway or in Scandinavia. How important is the focus on Scandinavia for your work as a foundation?
Well, the FreeOrd Foundation is not a very big foundation, and our main obligation and program has always been from the start in Norway. But throughout all this period, and especially the last 10 or 15 years, we have spent a considerable part of our budgets internationally, and especially in the US and in Europe, in particular Central Europe, Eastern Europe, when it comes to journalism and free media. We support lots of investigative and critical projects, mostly connected to outlets and organizations in Norway, freelancers, both individuals and groups are some of our most important grantees. But globally in Europe, we tend to give priority to outlets and organizations. But we are willing to discuss group projects on an independent level, provided that they have good prospects of being published in good places. Some of the specific cross-border projects we are funding has been with us for some years. In fact, I think we were one of the first funders of European cross-border investigative journalism from 2009 on, and then through providing the journalismfund.eu with seed funding. And that project was unique for its time. And the journalismfund.eu is still with us. One of our biggest receivers is the Investigate Europe, a small network, high quality, lots of good stories in 6 or 7 different countries. I would recommend you other funders to have a look at Investigate Europe. Really high quality work. And we are also a co-founder of the International Consortium of Investigative Journalism, journalists, of course, and the International Press Institute through our present program, IJ4U. And then we have 2 cross-border programs also where we are partners and not only giver of grants. That is the Perspektivi program in Russia, together with the Thomson Reuters Foundation, and also the broader foundation program with a focus on Central Europe called Civitatis. So that's some of our projects today, and yeah.
Thank you very much, Knut. I mean, we're already running out of time, unfortunately. But just one thing I would like to mention, Frit Ort says that they receive in the average 3,000 applications each year. And Frit Ort is not such a really huge, big organization. And you already mentioned that you received last year 5,200 applications, so 40% more. This could also be regarded as an outcry from my perspective of the media sector. This is also a sign how badly the money is needed and the funding is needed, and how much pressure the sector in the moment has to bear. And so thank you very much. I was very pleased and honored to moderate this panel and to have the European Commission, the European Parliament, and also you as representatives of the private donors with us. Thank you very much. We applaud your work, and we hope you will continue in the next years. Thank you. I will now hand over to our host that will host these 2 days of the Uncovered Conference. This is Ali Arslan. He's an international TV presenter and a journalist, former staffer of CNN and Deutsche Welle and ABC News in New York. He will take over now from here. I have to say thank you very much. We see us later at the ceremony for the Impact Award. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Lutz, for this first panel and this very kind introduction. Indeed, it's my great pleasure to be part of this very important and timely conference that will take place virtually here in Leipzig. I think I speak for all when I say the conference is off to a very lively, very informative start with the first panel. But there's much, much more to come, obviously, today and tomorrow as well. As a matter of fact, there are up to 3 things going on at the same time, 3 channels which are streaming simultaneously, many options for you to choose from. In order to check out the conference agenda and be up to date, do go to the conference website regularly. It's uncovered.ij4.eu. You will find the whole main conference agenda there. There's going to be a quick 15-minute break on the main agenda, meaning here on channel 1, but channel 2 and channel 3 are operating. Let me tell you what's going on there. On channel 2 at 3:15, you can find the Cross-Border Chronicles panel on investigating the pandemic. That'll start at 3:15. On channel 3, you can find the documentary. You can watch the documentary Daphne, Pen to Sharp. That'll take place on channel 3. Let me just point out one particular note concerning channel 3. You must register for the conference to receive an access code for channel 3. That has to do with copyright reason. I'm sure something you well understand. So as I said, 3 channels going on mainly at the same time. Do check out the conference agenda. Also, let me point out and introduce the conferencing software that is provided by Big Blue Button. You can't turn on your mic, but you can participate in the chat. So a lot of information that I've provided you with. Don't worry if you haven't gotten and absorbed it all. I will come back throughout the conference and keep you up to date. Needless to say, we're off to a great start. There's going to be a 15-minute break now, but we'll be back with a very, very important panel that'll take us behind the scenes of the FinCEN files and will highlight the power of networks to enable cross-border journalism. That'll take place sharp at 3 p.m. here. For now, I'm Ali Hassan. Great to be part of this conference, and see you back soon. Don't stray away too far. Catherine Giels, yeah. Hmm?
Eva, do we have your video?
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the main agenda of the Uncovered conference. At this point, I also want to give a warm welcome to our audience at Alex Berlin, which is joining us. So welcome. Of last year. They will tell us the behind the scenes story. The investigation, of course, has also been shortlisted for the IJ for EU Impact Award. And now, without further ado, I'm happy to hand it over to the chair of this panel, Catherine Giels. She's the director of the grants programs at the European Journalism Center. Catherine, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all well. I think we have almost 50 people with us today. So thanks very much for joining this session and for your time. So we're going to be speaking across the panelists for about 45 minutes in general. Half an hour of that will be a conversation between the panelists with me asking questions. And then at the end, for the last 15 minutes, we will be opening up to people in the audience to ask questions as well. So hopefully it all goes smoothly and we don't have any technical glitches, but we'll be well looked after, I'm sure, if we do. So to, I guess, basically introduce this session. So we're going to be talking about the FinCEN files, which was an investigation published in 2020 that revealed the role of global banks in an industrial scale money laundering. That was an investigation delivered by ICIJ, Big News, and 108 other news organizations from 88 countries, which of its kind was the largest ever cross-border investigation. And of course, it's very fitting for the theme of this conference overall and of the project that this conference sits within, which is IJ4EU, because the whole focus of that is cross-border investigations and the collaborative approach of those and sort of how these networks come about. So I will introduce my panel. First of all, we have Fergus Shiel, who's managing editor at the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, so ICIJ. We have Ariel Kaminer, global investigations editor at BuzzFeed News, and Eva Jung, who is the investigative journalist at Belinks, which is a Danish organization. So to kick off, so I'm first going to let the panel introduce themselves a little bit more in detail about their work and their background and you know, a few points that they'll speak about before we go into some of the other questions. So Fergus, I'll hand over to you.
So I'm Fergus Shiel, I'm the managing editor of ICIJ. ICIJ is a Washington-based not-for-profit, most famous for the Panama Papers and Paradise Papers. And we have a team ourselves of about 40 people scattered around the world, mostly in Washington, but also in Paris, Madrid, London, and elsewhere. And we work with hundreds of reporters around the world on projects each year to deliver what we hope is the best investigative reporting in the public interest.
Thanks. And over to Ariel.
I'm Ariel Kaminer, and I oversee the investigative reporting team at BuzzFeed News. We have 16 people within the newsroom who do investigations. We're also investigations with a global reach. And this was our first collaboration of this kind. And I suppose in a certain way it was, Fergus says it was the biggest collaboration of its kind anywhere. It was certainly a novel experiment for us, and I guess we'll talk more about that.
And over to Eva.
Hi everyone, so happy to be here today. My name is Eva Jung. I represent a newspaper called Berlingske, one of Denmark's or even the world's oldest newspapers dating back to 1749. We have a team of 5 investigative reporters, and working with the FinCEN files was our very first project with the ICIJ. So we were 2 reporters from Berlingske working on this. And Catherine, I'd be happy to elaborate a bit on what we worked with, what kind of stories we did with the FinCEN files.
Right.
So,
yep, go ahead.
Okay, so you know a lot of stories about dark money flows, money laundering is all about company structures. It's about offshores. It's about secretive layers. It can be quite difficult to make interesting for people and for the readers. It can be very complicated. But I think what the FinCEN files was actually to give us some quite clear answers to a story, especially that we at Berlingske have been very interested for a few years, that we work with on for a few years. It's a story about money laundering at Danske Bank, Denmark's biggest bank. It's one of the biggest known money laundering cases in history by now. It was the case of money laundering at the Estonian branch of Danske Bank, and it's currently being investigated by several US bodies and several European authorities as well. So what the FinCEN files were able to do was to give us some quite clear answers to, for instance, who were these customers at the bank? Who was it that sent their money through the Estonian branch of Danske Bank? What was possible since Danske Bank did not live up to the regulation? And one of the guys that we wrote about was a world famous Pakistani money launderer called Altaf Kanani. He is known to launder money from organized crime groups, drug trafficking organizations, even terrorists. And he's also a man who received 6 years of prison for his dark deeds. So what we were able to find in the FinCEN files was that some of the companies that he used for his money laundering was actually sending money through Danske Bank in Estonia. So I think that was a very clear example of what is possible, what kind of crime is possible if you don't follow money laundering regulation as a financial institution. And I have another example of a story that we found in the FinCEN files. If you'd like me to elaborate, Catherine.
Okay, we may have time to get onto that in a little bit. Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that. First question from me for Ariel is, I understand that BuzzFeed News, made the decision to share the leaked documents with ICIJ and to go about this project in a really collaborative way. So what was it about BuzzFeed News' decision to share the files with ICIJ? And a sort of a second question on the back of that is, what other options or approaches did your organization consider about how to handle the documents and how to share them?
Thanks for asking. We definitely did not come to the thought of sharing with ICIJ or anybody else right out of the gate. When we first gained access to this extraordinary trove of documents, not one of which was ever supposed to be available in the public domain, we started just kind of reading our way through it and picking out individual stories based on individual documents and looking around Trump and his orbit, the people around Trump. Trump is not mentioned anywhere in the documents, but people in kind of Trump land are a lot. And so we started kind of peeling off, one or another, and you could trace the suspicious movement of funds around the infamous meeting in Trump Tower to get dirt on Hillary Clinton. You could trace the movement of suspicious funds around other things that were happening, proximate to Trump. And that was our focus at first. And we got some good stories out of it, but they were atomized, they were discrete. And they didn't draw any connections among the documents or what they revealed. And also they were all focused in this one part of the world. I told them that, we talked about an enormous pile of data, and would they be interested in sharing? And they said yes. And I said, what? You told who? What? You told anybody about these documents? Not even revealed in any of these stories that we even had one of these documents in our possession. We only said that we had reviewed the single document in the story. And I said, what? But I went into the other room and breathed it into a paper bag. And when I was back to respiration, it turned out to be a great idea. He, of course, had not revealed anything about the contents or the nature of the documents. And we started to see that only really by making this a global project in a way that only ICIJ could ever make possible, could we really see the full potential and trace all of the connections through all of the countries. And the documents name people involved in, figures of power in countries we didn't know about and could never make all those connections. Mm-hmm. So we just saw this could be something on a completely different level.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And Fergus, then leading on from that, how would you describe this investigation as different to others in terms of scale and involvement and contribution from the range of different news organizations and the number of countries that they were coming from and sort of involved with?
When I think of this investigation, Catherine, I think of sort of like a James Bond character looking at a map full of green lights around the world. And that's how it started. It started with green lights. And then by the end, it was entirely red. There was a crisis in every corner of the world. And what we didn't anticipate, of course, was that COVID was going to come. And that made the whole project extremely difficult. And we were immensely fortunate that we had BuzzFeed as partners because they stayed focused throughout, and I'm immensely fortunate that we had people like Ava on the project and the other partners because they held true in what were some of the most difficult circumstances of any project ever undertaken. I'm sure we had partners getting sick, we had newsrooms closing down, we had people losing their jobs, we had entire organizations disappearing, and as that was going on, we also had to try and make sense of the BuzzFeed documents. And Ariel, when Ariel and her team came with the documents, we were so grateful, but we were equally immensely skeptical because we could see from the outset there were profound challenges in these documents. ICIJ is used to dealing with enormous numbers of documents, 11, 12 million, no problem. We've taken them on before, and it's just, it's another day at the office. There was only 2,100 of these, and they were hell. Absolute hell. We had 80 people working on them over a year to try to make sense of them. And they were poorly written. They didn't take us places. And but the great thing, the fantastic thing, was that BuzzFeed and together with our data team, John and the BuzzFeed reporters, we were able to chart a course which our partners joined us on, and it was a marathon journey to try and extract the information from them. And ultimately we did, and we were able to show profligacy on behalf of international banks of a kind that had never been demonstrated before. So it was a wonderful, challenging, brutal process.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great, thanks. All of you or whoever wants to maybe answer from various different experiences, and I guess it's a sort of a twofold question around you know, whether particular sort of logistical challenges or challenges with resources and communications and knowledge sharing that you experienced in this project that you hadn't experienced in other sort of cross-border or collaborative projects of maybe a similar size or similar types of organizations. And I'll probably ask that as a first question before I then jump into the second part of it, so not to confuse. But yeah, who would like to start off with that question and give examples of any particular challenges?
Fergus, I feel like that's, I'm going to defer to you.
Okay, I'll give you an example. Maybe this is the easiest way to do it. You know, so you have a document, and the document gives you the names of 4 people and money moving from one place to another. That's it. There's 4 people on that document, and you have to try and produce a story out of that. And so what we did was then we took those 4 names and we put them into Google, and we found out a little bit about them, and then we found court cases about them, and then we went from the court cases to the individuals, and then we talked to people in prison, and ultimately here's the names. And so that, and what we were able to do was we were able to pull in 80 reporters to look at these figures alone, and to do that over a year. And those reporters were so amazing that they were able to find a death on a trawler off the coast of Mauritania. They were able to find $1 million moving from Turkmenistan to Scotland. They were able to find a Ponzi scheme that had $1 billion had moved through Hong Kong, and that led to the death of a man in a Californian vineyard. And this is what investigative journalism is about. This is what BuzzFeed did. This is what Ava did. This is what our partners did. And it was extremely difficult. And as well as that, some fabulous reporters, including Simon Bowers and Carrie Keogh and Tom Moran and others, were looking at LLPs and LPs in London, and they were comparing the shell company data out of UK Companies House with the FinCEN files, which again was extremely onerous to demonstrate what a profound problem the UK has with shell companies. And so it was, and all of this was going on at the time that newsrooms were falling over. It was going over at the time, it was happening at the same time as Black Lives Matters was happening in the US. There were, here in DC, there were boarded up buildings and riots. And it was, you know, it was a really challenging project, but amazing things came out of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'll also just add that we, you know, we had to, we rescheduled the original date when the pandemic swept through, and every newsroom was completely 100% consumed. And there was some fear that we might not be able to hold the coalition together at all. Everybody was getting pulled off to cover, you know, the biggest story, maybe of our, you know, of our memory. Luckily, I don't know that we lost anybody outright. People got pulled off but returned, and you know, that was unforeseeable, obviously, for us and the rest of the world. I would also just add to Fergus's very eloquent description of how onerous the it was to unpack. None of our reporting relied exclusively on the documents. The wire transactions are, of course, they are what they are, but all of the descriptive elements in these documents, they were just written by people, bank's compliance department, and they're as fallible as anybody else. So all of the reporting that we published was backed up by all the stories that we published, I should say, were backed up by, old-fashioned reporting, with sources and knocking on people's doors and getting, court documents, as Fergus mentioned. And so as onerous as the challenge was of unpacking it, that was truly just the first step in what was the journey of all told, it was a year and a half for these organizations around the world.
It was a really difficult conversation I'm having with Ariel when she told me that she wanted to delay it for the second time, where I had told Ariel that delaying it once was bad and delaying it twice was impossible. And so that's what we had to do. And it was
the smile
understandable.
Was not, it was absent at that time. Yeah.
It was understandable because Ariel had Anthony and we're in Queens, and at that stage Queens was COVID central, or it was hell. It was hell. It was absolute hell.
Maybe also a relevant comment for working on big leaks in general as an investigative journalist. Journalists love big troves of documents, right? The more documents, the better. But it can also be overwhelming, especially if the documents are difficult to understand, as some of these SARS, for instance, were. So I think a tip from my point of view when working with big troves of documents for investigative reporters would also be, of course, ICIJ was a huge help of sort of going through, finding lots of different themes that were of interest to almost all reporters in the project. But I would also say, once you've had some time to sort of go through what are the different corners of the documents, find your own sort of subjects that you're interested in, because otherwise it can be a very overwhelming project to work on too many subjects at one time. So find the specific spots that you want to be an expert in the specific project. I think that helped it for us to not be too overwhelming when working with a big project like this. And I think you're very right in saying that a leak like this is a starting point. So I think we had some very great colleagues, for instance, in Italy at Espresso or at Süddeutsche. We also had some great colleagues that were able to actually find different leaks or leads in the FinCEN files, and then go out and get even more documentation on these specific subjects that they had an interest in. And that just shows it's sort of starting point to go and do some shoe leather reporting on top of that.
Okay, great. And following on from that, so it's obviously really important and beneficial to have a network of journalists and a network of news organizations in various countries already established, and whether it was via the likes of ICIJ or through other means, so you can effectively launch these types of investigations very quickly without spending so much time trying to understand, who's out there and who would want to get involved. And I guess maybe a question more for Eva, but also for Ariel as well, around, are there particular top tips or sort of advice that you would give people in the audience for collaborating with other news organizations and freelance journalists? If you were to start a next investigation or a new investigation, what would you say are the top things that you would need to have in place in order to make effective cross-border and collaborative projects come to fruition?
I guess I would say the first, it's sort of an obvious, since it would apply to any kind of collaboration in any setting, is to set out the rules clearly so that everybody joins the group with the same understanding of how things will play out. I'm very happy that I mean, obviously, this is not the first time that ICIJ has like this, although this may have been on an unprecedented scale. And Fergus guided us through that, very ably. But it would have been impossible if we were trying to negotiate the terms while the reporting was already underway. And I feel it is incredibly cool. It's flat. The organization is really flat, and it's built on everybody having total visibility into one another's work, against all the instincts that we've been, trained to develop about, competitiveness and hoarding your scoops. Total visibility. We could all see not only what the other news organizations, the other reporters were reporting on, we could actually see the reporting in real time. People posting their memos, their findings. Hey, what's this? Did you see this? Did you make this connection? Never been a part of anything like that before. But nobody has, though we all have visibility, nobody has any control over anything that anybody else is reporting or publishing. If you think that the guys in, Latvia are publishing something that is completely 1000% and is going to get them sued and discredited and laughed out of the continent, you can say so, but you have no control whatsoever. And that the paradox of total visibility and zero control is a sort of a counter model, and also a really great model that I found, just an amazing model for collaborations even beyond journalism that I've really thought about a lot.
Great, thanks. And Eva?
Yeah, I would maybe also call it trust. It's the same, I guess it's the same thing Ariel is saying. When you work on collaborations like this, of course, you need to sort of figure out if you don't have ICIJ vetting your colleagues for you, then you'll have to figure out some other way of vetting your colleagues. So figure out it's someone you can trust, so that you can share actually the information that you have with them, and that you're also pretty sure that they have some sort of same ethical standards as yourself. But then otherwise than that, I also believe in not too many rules, sort of deciding, of course, don't show your material to anyone that we haven't decided on together, and then maybe just a particular date of when to publish. And then of course all of the collaboration until that publication date is very important, as Ariel say, to keep a complete openness about what you found, so that you can work together on these different leads. I also, of course, think it's important to have some sort of closed network, an encrypted place to talk about your investigation and to share that information that you have. I'm sure a lot of people following this panel know about different sorts of communication that's encrypted, so that might be PGP or Signal or other types of communication. That's it's the basis of where you should start, just to make sure you have control of those different encrypted communication platforms. And then after that, of course, finding some sort of way of communicating also about the leads and everything, which can be done also on a platform. I've been lucky to work with the ICIJ and the OCCRP, who had platforms like this. So I haven't actually figured out where to find one besides that, but maybe someone has a tip in the panel or in the chat or something.
Great, thanks. And I'm conscious that we've got a few more minutes left before we then go to the audience, but I have tried to get 2 more questions in. And again, this could apply for any of you. Are there other sort of news organizations or freelance journalists that now, because of the investigation, have come into your realm or into your network that you've never worked with before, but now that you've worked with them, you know that it's an organization or freelancers that you would work with again in the future, whether they could bring particular expertise or particular knowledge, or they're from a specific country that has advantages for sort of future work. So I don't know if anyone in particular can answer that or everyone can.
I guess I'll jump in just to say, BuzzFeed News investigations team doesn't really do many collaborations, if any collaborations other than this, but I was so impressed. I was so impressed by the work of everybody that we came into contact with. Of course, I didn't meet or interact with every reporter on this huge project, but we were all just really floored by the amazing level of work that is being done in so many around the world. And in particular, for me, what was very moving, we all got together in Hamburg a year before we published to kick the project off. And there I met people who were doing extremely hard-hitting investigative work in settings where they had none of the legal protection, that my team enjoys, constitutional or otherwise. And, I met people who were, really literally putting their lives on the line to do this kind of work. And I found that just very, very, to be involved in a project with them was very moving to me personally.
Thank you. And Eva or Fergus, did you want to add?
Yeah, what's really, really satisfying and inspirational is when you work with reporters in countries where, as Ariel said, they have literally no resources. There are reporters such as Aloysius David, I'll give you a name, in Liberia. He does not have a publication. He writes the stories, he puts them on his phone, he sends them to a nearby country where they are published because it's too dangerous for him to publish in his own country. And currently in Niger, there's one of the reporters who's on the FinCEN files is continuing with stories into defense contracts that have caused chaos in that country. And the bravery that goes into those stories is just, it's phenomenal. It's incredible. And going back to what Ava said, it's all about trust. It's all about trust and friendship and having a shared commitment to investigations in the public interest. And it's an absolute pleasure to work with so many people who care so much.
Thank you. And Eva, anything for you on that question? No, that's okay. I'll ask one more really quick question, and then we can go on to the chat to see if there's anyone from the audience that would like to participate as well. So I know that there's a podcast for the investigation, and what would you say, I guess this is for Ariel, but anyone else could jump in here as well. What would you say is the benefit of publishing the investigation across various platforms or sort of more creative platforms? And do you think that there's been a benefit not only for audiences to engage in different ways, but also benefits for the collaboration? And, it was the thinking behind something like the podcast just for audiences that you're trying to get to engage with the content, or was it also for the benefit of, the partners as well?
Yeah, the podcast was, the inspiration was just on the most basic level, just to reach more people who might not see or engage with the articles in the same way, or who might be daunted by an article that's about, obscure financial machinations, although of course we, tried to make them accessible, but this was just a different way of presenting the material and hopefully reaching more people. Obviously much more storytelling, driven by personalities, really showcasing, the two reporters, Anthony Cormier and Jason Leopold, who are the sort of original members of this team, and then the others that added on. But that was just a BuzzFeed News project in terms of the making of the podcast. It happened, mostly towards the end of the project, when everybody, certainly on our team and equally so in all the other newsrooms, I'm certain, was they were all so consumed with finishing the project. And so we did that piece of it was just in-house, as opposed to the rest of it, which was 100% collaborative. And I imagine that all the other news organizations, contemplated, how to maximize their stories as well, and might have done a special video project or an audio project or whatever. That was ours.
Yeah. Okay, great. Eva or Fergus, do you have anything to add onto that? About creative ways to communicate the project?
No, it's just to say the podcast is great. People should listen to it. It's really entertaining, and there are also other podcasts which aren't as ab fab, but are worth listening to. I think with these projects that you have to throw everything at them. You have to have illustrations. We have illustrations, photos. The only thing I would add is, big projects like this are a mental challenge, and the way to pull them off, whether they're big or small, because most people won't be part of a project that involves 400 people, is to consider them in phases, and to stay calm, and to do urgent tasks urgently, and to consider all tasks urgent, and just to narrow your focus as you go along. And that would be my message to people who are listening to this and thinking, I'm probably not going to do a project that has 400 people in it, but I have a smaller project. And how do you do it? And what I would say is, the message from this is that despite the challenges that you will face, so long as you do it in phases, you'll succeed.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so we should move on to any questions that are coming in from the audience. I think the best way might be for people to put a question in the chat as opposed to coming off mute. Our moderator from ECPMF might tell us otherwise. But if anyone has any questions, and just be mindful that to read the questions in there first if you can, because what we don't want is for people to ask the same question over and over again, because it becomes quite difficult to try and work out which is which. Yeah, so hopefully I'm giving the right information and in letting people add a question to the chat.
Maybe I can just add a point whilst we are waiting. So in order to, we were talking about how to find people to collaborate with, or how to set up a collaboration with other investigative journalists. I think it's also always a good idea to find people to work with that have different skills than yourself. So at Berlingske, we're a very small team of investigative journalists, so we don't have the capacity to do sort of a very big processing of data, for instance. So we need to work with people who know how to process big amounts of data. But then we have some other expertise. Then maybe we can get access to sources or documents or anything like that. So perhaps also think about that next time you try to set up a big investigation. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're still waiting. I'm amazed that people are so shy in asking questions. Usually these panels, in my experience, we're bombarded with people. So I'll give it another minute, and then maybe I can add another question myself if we're not getting any takers.
Perhaps I can just, in the meantime, tell you about another interesting story we found in the FinCEN files. So we were also able to find a very interesting story about how was the money laundering at Danske Bank made possible. How was this even possible? It was a money laundering case of a large part of 200 billion euros that flowed through the bank. And what was interesting in the FinCEN files were we were able to read also how the bankers of Estonia were working with clients, helping setting up secretive offshores, and at the same time, these bankers who were receiving moderate pay for being a banker in Estonia, the police found large amounts of money on their private bank accounts. They found expensive jewelry, expensive cars. So that for us was also a new view of what was going on at this and a very concrete way of working in the bank, which was of course something that police is very interested in, this sort of pattern in Estonia.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I think we have 2 questions coming in, so I'll just let these people finish typing, and just to let everyone know on the call that we have to finish sharp at 15:45. So we've got 4 minutes for people to finish their questions and for us to answer them. We're under strict orders. I've also been asked by ECPMF in the here we go. I'll ask this one now then. So 31 years after the Convention of the Rights of the Child, and in 2021, the International Year of the Elimination of the Child Labour, tens of millions of children work for corporations to reduce costs and increase profits. I would like you all to consider investigating how many hundreds of thousands of children work for each of the largest corporations in the world. What do you think? I think that's that may be very hard to answer with a very short answer from our panelists. I'll just read out the second question now quickly as well. Do you experience difficulties? So what we'll do, we'll start answering the second question, just because I think it's going to be easier to give a specific answer to. Do you experience difficulties during the collaboration due to different journalistic practices and ethics internationally? Or is there a global journalism culture that helped while working with the other journalists? So who would like to respond to this question by Ellie? Ariel, go for it.
I don't really have an answer beyond just saying that, you know, this framework that Jay set up that I mentioned before, really let everybody approach this material their way. So there were a lot of shared values, and there were also no doubt, some regional differences, and that was fine. That was really the beauty of ICIJ's framework, is any control over what anybody else does. And so whatever regional variations are, they don't get in anybody else's way. You know, everybody's just tackling these stories in the way that they see fit for their audience, for their readers, for their standards.
Yeah, great, thank you. And then just going on to the first question. So if anyone can answer this within 1 minute, or if it's something that you're already exploring with your organizations or your members, then I guess that could be a response as well. Eva, well, I think.
I would just say that, of course, stories of for instance, if there was a major Danish company using child labor abroad, of course, this would be an interesting story for us. It's not something that I have worked with intensively with before, but if I ever received a tip or understood that this was the practice of major Danish companies, then of course this is something that I would investigate. And if you have any tips, please feel free to let me know.
Okay, thank you very much. Fernando put the Danish pension funds profit from child labor. So maybe, Fernando, you might want to get in touch with Eva directly through one of her channels to discuss more. So that is the end of this session. Thank you so much for the almost 50 people who have been with us for the last 45 minutes. I hope it was really informative, and you know a bit more about the FinCEN files, but also a bit more about the collaborative and cross-border nature of this, and sort of any advice that the panelists gave us. So I just want to say thanks again for Ariel, Fergus and Eva for joining us. And I think that's where we now leave the meeting. Remembered not to thanks again, everyone, for your time.
And indeed, we're back here in Leipzig. Thank you so much for a very informative session. Indeed, I think I speak for all when I say it was very exciting to hear the behind-the-scenes story of the FinCEN files and hear from the journalists who were directly involved in these investigations. Thanks also to Catherine, of course, for moderating and chairing that session. So we already have had two wonderful, very informative, insightful sessions. More to come, of course. Always keep your eye on the conference agenda. Next up here in 15 minutes, we will have the panel titled Reporting on Influence, Following the Money Across Borders. That'll take place 15 minutes from now. So whether you are watching us from home or from Alex, Berlin, regardless, it's wonderful to have you with us at this important and timely conference. Stay tuned, don't stray away too far. We'll be back in 15 minutes with more panels to come. Everyone, welcome back. For those who are just joining us, once again, I'm Ali Aslan, international TV presenter and journalist, and it's my great pleasure to guide you throughout the next, today and tomorrow, throughout the next 48 hours. We're off to a very strong start with two highly informative and insightful sessions. And of course, we are going to continue on that particular level. When I was a journalism student at Columbia University in New York, one of my professors said, to get to the bottom of a story, you have to follow the money. I think the validity still remains true 2 decades after I finished my studies. And therefore, the third panel will look at exactly that. It's titled Reporting on Influence, Following the Money Across Borders, where journalists from investigations funded by IJ4EU will discuss how follow the money journalism can be used to improve reporting on influence peddling. That's certainly going to be a very important discussion. Let me also point out to you that there's a networking room. Make good use of it, and to be up to date, do often refer to and visit the conference agenda. And now, without further ado, let me hand over to the chair, to the moderator of panel 3. He's the IJ4EU project coordinator at the International Press Institute, Timothy Large. Timothy, The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And thank you all very much for coming to join this final panel of the day. It's not the final event of the day, of course. We have the IJ4EU Impact Award coming up at 6 o'clock on this channel, but it's the final panel discussion. And I think, well, I'm confident it's going to be a pretty interesting one. Now, when you hear the words follow the money, chances are you think of investigating corruption or illicit financial flows, money laundering, tax evasion, that kind of thing. But some investigative journalists have found themselves tracing the money trails, as it were, to expose something else. And that something is influence, whether political or ideological. We're talking today about influence that crosses borders. Maybe it's aimed at dividing and destabilizing. Maybe it's to give strength to an agenda or to promote radical ideas. And I'd say this year, maybe half a dozen or so IJ4EU investigations have followed the money to expose transnational influence of some kind, from proving who's financing disinformation in the Baltics, say, to demonstrating links between the far right and the COVID denial scene in Europe, for example. So, can we speak of an entire genre of investigative journalism, or is this just good old-fashioned money trail reporting repurposed? However you look at it, what are the tricks of the trade when it comes to this kind of work, and what are the challenges of doing this with remote teams? To discuss these and other issues, I'm joined by a wonderful panel of IJ4EU grantees who have each, in their own way, followed the money across borders to report on influence. Anna Gielewska is editor of Fundacja Reporterów in Poland. Zoltan Sipos is editor-in-chief of Adlazo Erdele in Romania. And Anastasia Kirilenko is a Russian freelance journalist who specializes in Russian influence in Europe. Big welcome to you all. As always, we encourage questions from the audience. So I'll try to keep an eye on the chat here and we'll get to them shortly. So please type in your questions or observations. But let's begin our conversation. And I think, Anna, let's start with you. You and your cross-border team, and it's really quite an international team, many countries involved, have been working on a project called Radicals with Reach. And in a minute, I'll put the link into the chat here so people can see it. In a nutshell, this exposes how international networks of ultra-conservative organizations are essentially attacking liberal values in Central and Eastern Europe and dictating the public agenda, everything from women's rights to LGBT rights, that kind of thing. Briefly, what were you trying to reveal in this investigation, and how did you follow the money to do it? And where did the money trail lead you exactly? Perhaps you could spend a few minutes just introducing your investigation.
Sure. Thank you, Timothy, for this kind introduction and for having me. So indeed, our investigation focuses on the growing influence of ultra-conservative organizations and networks in Central Europe and beyond. In Poland, in the last months, this influence was particularly spectacular, I would say. So, in autumn, Ordo Iuris, which is one of the most influential ultra-conservative organization, building its own regional and international networks, partnerships, and allies. So in autumn, these organizations in Poland celebrated huge success when the Polish Constitutional Tribunal almost banned any legal abortions. And now these organizations actually are leading a campaign against the Istanbul Convention. So, but while it is especially spectacular in Poland, it's definitely not only a Polish case, and that was our driving question. So, how such ultra-conservative networks operate locally, cooperate regionally and internationally, and what we can find regarding their financial workings and how they coordinate their actions and so on. And one of such most secretive radical conservative networks is the TFP movement, which is traditional family property originated in Brazil, and its Polish branch based in Krakow has founded Ordo Iuris and supported it financially, but also has funded many organizations across the globe, and especially in Central Europe. So we decided first to take a closer look at this Polish TFP branch. And in a few months of our investigations, we actually found out that this is the actual financial and operational center of this whole movement now, sending hundreds of thousands, or rather millions of euros actually, to organizations overseas, including Slovakia, Lithuania, Croatia, but also France or Brazil or the Netherlands. So so what we tried to understand was like how these organizations work, cooperate, but also what is their fundraising model, because it quickly turned out that the fundraising model originated in Brazil, then was reapplied in France, then in Poland. And so they are pretty successful in terms of collecting money from donations for the rosaries or Lady Fatima cards, and then use this money for campaigns against, as you said, liberal values, against LGBT rights, women's rights, and so on. So we found out that the same organizations, the same individuals popping up again and again in different countries. They form some alliance with local partners, create some new networks, run this kind of similar campaigns. And basically what we did was like, first we tried to collect obviously as much data as we could. So browsing the card files, financial data, financial reports of the organizations in different countries. For example, we were able to find some data we couldn't get in Poland, in other countries like in Slovakia or Lithuanian registers. But simultaneously, we were kind of comparing their modus operandi, their activities, their campaigns in specific countries, as well as their international meetings, events they attend. So different kind of actions and different documents they were preparing, like petitions, anti-gender petitions, and so on. We also examined links, political links, connections. So like kind of mapping this influence in different ways. The financial was super interesting, was, I would say, fundamental, because that was like kind of evidence that there are connections, not only, cooperation, but also financial connections. So that's what we did.
What were some surprising links that you uncovered? What were these connections?
Well, so I think, there were many surprises. One of the most intriguing discovery, I would say, was the links between some, lavish mansion in Sao Paulo and castle in France and house in Krakow. In other words, like the assets we discovered belonging to this whole TFP network and specific organizations. And, our reporter in France, for example, managed to get into the castle and talk to some TFP members that it turned out are living there. So in this castle, so there was like kind of this surprising discoveries, but definitely for me, what was the most surprising, like in more serious way, was that realizing that this Polish TFP branch turned out to be so wealthy and, having tens of millions of euros in assets, expensive these properties in Poland. And that is so successful in fundraising in Poland, but also in different countries, like the same people. Also, like in a country like Estonia, where there are not many Catholics, who would like naturally donate for the rosaries and so on. So yeah, there were like this kind of surprising findings.
Presumably the ultra-conservative organizations haven't been too pleased with your reports, your findings.
They haven't.
How have they responded? What kind of kickback, if any, have you received?
Well, it somehow differ depending on the country, but obviously, like the most expected, actually, reaction from our perspective that wasn't surprising was some kind of, smear campaigns and attacks, like verbal attacks on social media. Especially our Lithuanian partners, Siena LT, and also our Estonian journalists face this kind of, attacks on social media. But mostly it's like on Twitter. So at least for now, you know, you never know what you can expect.
Let's hope it stays that way. Thank you, Anna, for that really interesting little preview of your investigation. I've put the link in the chat here, so anybody who clicks on there can go more. I believe there are still some stories to be published. It's not quite finished yet, but you've done a lot already. So great stuff. I'm sure we'll come back to some of the issues you've spoken about, but let's move on now to Zoltan next. Zoltan, you're the team leader of a project called Hungarian Money, Orban's Control. This is also ready for distribution. It's on the IJ4EU site, so I'll include the link in a second on that too. But this is essentially a data-driven investigation that shows how Hungary's populist government has channeled hundreds of millions, maybe more than $1 billion even, of euros earmarked for ethnic Hungarian communities abroad to exert political influence in neighboring countries, so Romania, Slovenia, and so on, Slovakia, and the region. How did you follow the money trail, and what did you find? This is a really interesting one.
Thank you for the invitation. Our goal with this investigation was to map the influence of the Viktor Orban government on the Hungarian communities living in countries near Hungary, namely Romania, Slovakia, Serbia, Croatia, and Slovenia. More precisely, we started investigating the grants that were awarded by the governments to the NGOs, churches, and businesses in these communities. Grants that have increased exponentially from 2016 onwards. Our hypothesis was that the Hungarian government uses these grants to exert influence on the communities living in the neighboring countries, promoting illiberal practices and playing an important role in the weakening of democratic institutions. So how did it work? There are several state funds that give away grants to Hungarian organizations. The largest of these is the Bethlen Gábor Fund. In 10 years, this fund gave away grants totaling at least 670 million euros. So we scraped the grants decisions that were published on the website of the fund and began working with the data. So we basically set out to find which organizations got most of the money in each country. What role do these organizations play in the communities? What kind of policies do these organizations promote? Was there a change in their communication once they started receiving the money? How are these grants used? Does the community benefit from this money? I'm from Romania. I'm a journalist from Romania, and I have been covering this issue for quite a while now, at least for Romania. And as part of this project, I took a look at the relationship between the DAHR, which is the most important political organization of the 1.2 million Hungarian community living in the relationship between the two organizations was glacial. But gradually, the DAHR became a close ally of Fidesz. And the grants awarded to different Transylvanian organizations certainly played a role in this shift.
You mentioned that you scraped the data. Is that the primary way that you were able to follow the money? Because I'm assuming that these funds are not at all transparent, right? You can't just go and look on a big online portal and see all the different grants distributed through the state funds for for ethnic projects abroad. I mean, could you just go into a bit more detail about how you actually?
This is kind of tricky, and I believe this practice shows very nicely the approach of the Hungarian government to transparency and openness. So if you go to the BGA website, you will find actually lists of grants on that website. So at the first glance, it seems okay, like we have pretty much all the data. And we scrape this data because the decisions are like printed and scanned and then uploaded. So nobody really can work in an Excel in that format. One must scrape and convert into Excel. And what we found is that the numbers don't match. So basically they publish something and the data seems okay at the first glance. However, the more you delve into this data, the more problematic it becomes. Also, and actually there are two separate data sets. There were the decisions. So basically the decisions BGA decides to give away money to certain organizations. And then we had a data set with the actual payments. And the day before we wanted to publish, we found out that between the two data sets, there's a huge difference. We found 700 million euros in difference. And basically, we postponed publication and tried to find out why we have this huge difference. Like the BGA decisions, the contracts. So the payments showed 670 million euros in 10 years. The decisions showed 1.4 billion euros. So there's a 700 million difference. And we could not find any pattern. So we know something is wrong, but we cannot really explain what is wrong with this data.
So again, underlining the sheer lack of transparency in all of this.
Exactly.
And what is the end game here for Prime Minister Viktor Orban and his government? You mentioned a little bit about, but what is the point of spending all this money? What changes, or what sort of influence beyond just kind of general political influence is he trying to exert in neighboring countries? Why?
We Hungarians from Romania, because I am Hungarian, part of this minority, we call this a parallel reality. This means that Hungarians in Romania actually are living physically in Romania, but somehow they are closed. They have so many ties to Hungary, and every person has so many ties that sometimes it feels that Hungarian people are living in a parallel reality, and they are actually closer to Hungary than to Romania. And this is kind of, this is called by scientists the virtual reunification of the nation. Right. And this is problematic in so many levels. Like Hungarians don't trust Romanian authorities, for example. Hungarians tend to be much more conservative than average Romanians. Viktor Orban and his policies are very popular here. Hungarians can vote in the Hungarian elections. They have to have citizenship for this. And actually Fidesz gets more than 90% of the votes of Hungarians who are living abroad. So basically Fidesz is building this pretty considerable support in the neighboring countries that at least theoretically could lead him to 1, 2, or maybe 3 seats in the parliament when the elections come.
Thank you very much, Zoltan. That's a really good overview of your investigation. And I would encourage anyone who's interested to look at the link I've just shared there. Hungarian money, Orban's control. It's absolutely fascinating. And again, it's very much a team effort in many countries in the region. Really great stuff. Okay, let's move on now to Anastasia. Now, Anastasia, it's a little bit tricky because your investigation is ongoing. It hasn't been published yet. It's really, when it comes out, I think it's going to be quite hard-hitting, but we have to be a little bit careful about what we say here, simply because it isn't out yet. So maybe speaking in quite general terms, what can you tell us about the work you've been doing, or at least some of the general principles of trying to track Russian influence in Europe, which is the overarching theme? I don't want to give away the story itself, but what can you tell us?
Yes, sure. Thanks for having me here. We are a team of journalists from 7 countries in Europe, in large sense. I mean, also in UK, for example, and in Russia, not only EU. And we are following the scheme of the fundraising of Russian, we call them fake experts and fake conferences. I will explain later why we call it fake. They promote conservative values, anti-EU values, anti-LGBT, for church values, etc. Like in the investigations previously mentioned. But what is interesting, who is behind it in Russia? In Russia, we have, corrupt, politically exposed persons, and surprisingly, they are in charge of implementing the system of influence in Europe. Our assumption is that they are somehow pardoned for the embezzlement in Russia, for the enrichment, if they give at least a part of their money to a kind of a slush fund. And we had an excellent sourcing and even found a document on the existence of the system called basin or slash fund, which is a true sense. So it is a cross-border investigation, and at the beginning it was even difficult to explain to European partners, journalists from Europe, that it's real corrupt schemes, and we are talking about billions, but in Russia the freedom of speech as at 149th rank among 180. And this is why this is underreported, or it is it was reported, but in a sense that small category people were somehow punished. Some of them even went in prison. So as I said, a part of it went to a malign influence in Europe. I think this is the first time that we combined both anti-corruption investigation and also reporting on influence. So we closer look into those pro-conservative conferences, etc. We found links to corruption, to schemes. We mentioned some bizarre things. For example, an NGO pretends to be a political one, but an expert in real estate is behind in Europe. Sometimes it was also interesting as when we talk about cross-border, cross-cultural differences. For example, I'm asking the Swiss journalist. I found that one of the NGOs we are talking about was founded with cash, but probably in Switzerland it's okay. And it is founded by a man who we believe to be corrupt in journalistic terms. It means with evidence from whistleblowers. Also from we did also classic reporting, meeting people who were in the orbit of this particular oligarch. So it was really exciting. I thought before that I knew much about Russia, but now we are like communicating with whistleblowers. One of them survived an assassination attempt. Another one says he was threatened of death by someone who pretends to be just a pro-church good man, let's say. And this is really terrifying, but in the same time exciting to know the truth.
Thanks, Anastasia. Oh, can I ask you, do you ever fear for your own security? Do you feel this is dangerous work, and do you take precautions?
Yes, it's a good question. In Russia, we have now a format of the answer, and the protagonists, they even don't go to court, but they like give a press conference saying before the investigation is published, but as soon as they received questions like an attack is being prepared against us, please don't believe. It already happened to me with my previous investigations. 1 year before Panama Papers, the format was new. Now it's nothing new. And so that's life. The Russian TV already showed me like a journalist of the most irrespectful media in Russia. It is the Insider investigative website. I'm cooperating with them. So the challenge for them is to discredit the investigation, but of course I hope that the text will speak for itself with many convincing evidence, so I'm not afraid.
You mentioned earlier that this investigation combined corruption investigating, the money laundering and so on, with looking into influence. And I think that's really interesting in the sense, I was going to ask you all, do you see this as investigating influence as a completely different sort of skill set or a different type of journalism? Or is it just the same as all this other, just tracing illicit financial flows and so on? I'd be interested to hear what other people think about that too. Are they basically this different sides of the same coin, or do you have to do something very different when you're investigating influence through tracing the money?
I think yeah, if I can start.
Please.
We had to struggle against some kind of skepticism. So it's freedom of speech. What is wrong about? But we believe that, of course, if we can see corrupt funds behind, it's not only about freedom of speech. Also, many links are hidden, etc. But yes, I think that not many journalists do both. I have also a chance to do monitoring of Russian media for part-time job, and I can see how they really count on having agents of influence up to Putin, the candidate presidency. And this is really important to investigate. And usually journalists who speak only about corruption, they are like inside countries. So this is like transborder skills.
Anna, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I was thinking right now about this question, which is super interesting. And I think like in terms of, methodology and journalistic approach, probably it's not very different, but from my perspective and from the perspective of our investigation, maybe it's more different in terms of focus. So first, in our case, there is nothing illegal here, and even though there is nothing illegal, it is still super interesting, like how it is all built, created, and kind of distributed, and how this money is circulating across the globe, and how it is used to erode these liberal values, and also in terms of analyzing these fundraising models that I described. It's just interesting to understand how it can be reapplied in different countries, because this is actually something that's really help us to understand the course of the events around what is going on. So this is like digging deep in what is happening and how the society is changing. And secondly, I think when following the money to report on influence, the specific amounts are maybe less important. So amounts just help us understand the connections, networks, and how, for example, the international campaigns or marches and so on might be coordinated. So even though when we don't have like specific amount that was transferred from one to another bank account, we can still kind of following the money to understand better what is going on. That's kind of what I think about it.
That's interesting. Well, we're in the part now where I'd love to bring in questions from the audience.
Sorry.
Yes,
can I answer as well? Because this is a super interesting question. Yes, I totally agree with. I'm sorry. That here the exact amounts of money are not that important. Influence certainly has to do with money, but it is much more than that. And following the money is pretty much a standard investigative journalism process. However, measuring influence is something different. What I did on my story was basically I started reading newspapers. Like 10 years back, I started taking notes of what these very influential politicians said 10 years ago about Viktor Orban. And basically, I created a timeline of what they said, and then I put the money flows on this timeline as well. And it is like it can be seen pretty clearly how the way these people are talking changes, and how the money starts to flow in pretty much in the same period of time.
Zoltan, I'm glad we have you. I thought we'd lost you. You've disappeared from my screen. I'm not sure if others can see, but we can certainly hear you. And I'm glad you're here because we have a question from the audience specifically addressed to you. It's from Rebecca Harms. Thank you, Rebecca, for your question. She's thanking you for the work and asking, has Orban's money also resulted in MPs in the parliaments of neighboring states? Did you also investigate such financial support for the Hungarian minority in Ukraine?
I would start with the second question. Actually, yes, this is kind of the blind spot of this investigation. We didn't have a team member in Ukraine, not because we didn't want to, because like Ukraine is super interesting, but like we could not find a journalist who knows this community and knows the language and can write such an investigation. So basically, this is super interesting, and I would be very glad to be able to do some work in this Ukrainian community. Simply, we could not do it because we didn't have a team member there. We could not find anybody. The first question, I am not sure I understand. No, in Romania and in the neighboring countries, no, there are no MPs in the country parliaments that are Fidesz politicians. However, basically every major political organization now in these countries is somehow connected to the Hungarian government. So basically in Romania, the Hungarian party, the DAHR, is a close ally now of Fidesz.
I seem to recall that in fairly recent elections in Slovakia, the ethnic Hungarian party there, for the first time in a long time, didn't make it into parliament.
Yes.
So in a sense, maybe it's not working, at least in Slovakia. Was that a surprise for you?
Actually, no. Yes, it was. It was a very big surprise. The fact that none of the Hungarian parties got in the parliament. I believe it is a very sad thing, because like being a minority in one country makes it super difficult to kind of influence political decisions in your own country if your organization is not part of the parliament. So this is a huge blow for the Hungarians in Slovakia, I believe.
Thanks. Right, we have about 7 or 8 minutes left, so I hope we'll get a question or two more from the audience. Please type away in the chat. In the meantime, I'd be interested to ask you all what some of the challenges were in terms of doing this kind of work with remote cross-border teams. It's complicated enough, but you were dispersed and you were from different organizations often. How did that work? And what kind of issues were there to do with handling data, security, sensitivity, all of that kind of stuff? I'd be fascinated for a quick insight into your experiences there. Anybody want to jump in on that one?
I can start.
Please.
Well, because of this COVID-19, we could not meet with everybody we wanted to, with sources who obviously were supposed to talk, off the records. So by phone, etc. It went slowly, and sometimes we even did not get what we still, but we hope somehow. And even to meet, because we had a meeting, but it was difficult even to know how to travel, etc. So it was difficult, but probably I said already all those cross cultural differences played an important role. Anna said that this is nothing illegal about the influence, but still it's probably immoral, let's say, or something, if I understood correctly. But I think it is illegal. In case of Russia, what happens when corrupt money come from Russia? Initially, it is stolen from Russian budget. Surprisingly, the Russian prosecutor's office does not send, to European countries requests saying, "Or we are investigating something, somebody stole it," etc. So basically, for Europe, it is clean, and I was surprised how the states of rule of law finally rely to states in Russia, because they say, "Oh, we don't have final proof that the money is embezzled." But in case when you don't have a state of rule of law like Russia, it's normal. So we gathered a lot of circumstantial evidence that something is wrong without a stamp of Russian state.
Anna, do you have any thoughts on that?
So, well, maybe just to clarify, what I meant is
that even if there is nothing illegal, it is still interesting, but it's obviously like probably, you know, there are different examples. So it might be, you know, something legal in one case and not very in another, but that's still fascinating to track. And, you know, actually within our investigation, our Hungarian reporter, Martin, found out pretty interesting links. So the organization, that ultra-conservative organization involved somehow in this whole, you know, network map, is getting public money as well. And, you know, similar case is in Lithuania. So that might be some new questions emerging from that. But going back to Timothy's question, so what was the biggest challenge? Like, obviously, like the pandemic restriction actually paralyzed field reporting. So totally agree here with what Anastasia just said. In our case, there was also a challenge to get the data. But actually, the biggest challenge turned out to be the news that actually, you know, changed our initial plans for the investigations in terms like when we want to publish the stories, like at the end and so on, because suddenly, you know, in autumn, late October, there was this constitutional tribunal decision to ban abortion. And then women took to the streets in Poland. And actually, in one moment, our investigation was in the very center of the events happening around. So we could like actually measure this influence on the street of this ultra-conservative organization. Some of the women, you know, were protesting in front of the Ordo Iuris office in Warsaw. So yeah, but we were just like trying to adjust, and so in this course of the events, we changed the plan and instead like started publishing some ready findings immediately and so on. So it would, you know, allow better understand the background of the events, like in terms of for the audience and for the public. So I think, you know, yeah, but definitely we have a great team in this project that quickly adapted to this change. So yeah, but it would be great to meet in person, and that would make much more sense for sure.
Yeah. Zoltan, just quickly, we don't have much time, but did you have any remote challenges? How did you find it working with such a large and dispersed team?
It was difficult. Mostly because we never met in person with most team members. And you know, when you are communicating only online, you also have to factor in when you write something to think about how that thing might come across. And like for me, it was always kind of this dilemma, like how should I put things, and what does the other understand when I'm writing this and this. And yeah, that was quite a challenge. And I believe like if we had the chance to meet each other and kind of make a sense of our personality and style of work, it would have been much easier.
That's a theme that's come up in quite a few teams in the past year. The difficulties with the cultural differences and just the kind of project management level challenges that any complex investigation inevitably has. It's easy to think that everything will go swimmingly, and things, of course, don't always. It's quite interesting to see that. Sometimes it's not the news or the big security threats that are the problem. It's little project management type things. We're out of time, I'm afraid. It's 4:45. Maybe just I will grab one more minute to ask each of you very quickly if you had one piece of advice for anybody else who's interested in doing this kind of work, following the money to expose influence. What would it be? Just one little nugget of wisdom that you've taken away from your experience here for anybody else. Anastasia?
Yes, well, just to take this problem seriously, a challenge for European countries when we have freedom of speech, to really to look in depth into this influence to understand what's maybe wrong about it. Many issues in Europe are now decided by 2% of hesitating people. I mean, Brexit, also elections to European Parliament, etc. And even if those malign actors can influence only 1 or 2%, in some cases it may be decisive. So I advise to take this problem seriously.
Yeah, great point. Anna, any final words?
So my little piece of advice would be very practical, actually, and very quick to start with figuring out very precisely and creating the space for this work. So, so practical space. I mean, how you handle data, how you communicate, like all of these channels, and how you actually, what tools are you gonna use to kind of coordinate it and collect all the data. That is a good starting point, I think.
Thank you. And Zoltan, 20 seconds. Any
very good point, Anna. My advice would be, like in every major investigation has one point when everything seems hopeless. There will be a point when you will say, okay, so this is a huge mess. I failed. Okay, at that point, don't give up.
Good advice to end this session on. I'd like to thank you all very much for taking part in this. Anna, Anastasia, and Zoltan. It's been really interesting to hear your stories, and we will read them online and look forward to seeing yours, Anastasia, when that comes out in a matter of days, we hope. So thanks very much, and thanks to our audience. So I believe that's it for the day, apart from the Impact Award ceremony coming up. So I'll hand back over to our moderator. Thanks so much.
Indeed, Timothy, there's still much more to come, but for now, thank you so much to this very interesting debate and discussion on how follow the money journalism can be used to improve reporting on influence peddling. And thank you, of course, to Timothy for chairing and moderating. We will actually now have a long break here on the main channel, on channel 1, but there are still main things, a lot of things going on other channels. On channel 2, for instance, you can catch the end of the Cross-Border Chronicles investigating the environment panel, or you can head to channel 3, which is showing the documentaries Fraud Factory and Invisible Workers. Otherwise, we will see you back here for the IJ4EU Impact Award, which starts at 6 p.m. But do be back here around 5:55. We will start the stream a couple of minutes earlier, and we will then, of course, we are very curious as to who will win these awards, and this will be all in the spirit, of course, of celebrating cross-border journalism. For now, enjoy the break or the documentaries and panels on channel 2 and 3. I'll see you back here in an hour or so for the Impact Awards. I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear you. The volume is a bit low. I'll ask the directors here to tune it up.
I think I'm meant to go over the shortlist one more time. That was what I was asked to do. So I'll do that quickly before I announce. Yeah, I'll do that before. So thanks very much to you, to all of the organizers. We had a really interesting session discussing this shortlist. It took a bit of time to come to an agreement because these entries are so different and they're all strong in very different ways. Some of them were these huge, wide-ranging cross-border cooperations involving dozens of journalists, while others were much more narrow in their focus, but they were nonetheless brilliant pieces of journalistic work. So I'll just quickly run through the shortlist. We had the Daphne project, which was an IJ4EU supported investigation, which followed up on high-level corruption in Malta. We had the Ibiza affair, which was a cooperation between Spiegel, Süddeutsche Zeitung, and Falter about this extraordinary case that we remember, I think all of us, of the Strache video in Austria. We had the Troika laundromat, which was coordinated by the OCCRP into a huge network of offshore companies that we used for money laundering. We then had the FinCEN files, another massive investigation coordinated by the ICIJ, involving more than 100 outlets. We had Lost in Europe, which was another IJ4EU supported investigation. And this one was about the fates of migrant children who have gone missing in Europe. The next one we had was another story coordinated by OCCRP, which was the dodgy paperwork undermining Europe's COVID fight. I think the title there is pretty self-explanatory. We had the Global Anti-Abortion Misinformation Project, which was coordinated by Open Democracy, looking into how American Christian conservative groups use misinformation. We had another OCCRP coordinated investigation, the Fraud Factory, which was about the work of a scam call center in Kiev that this activity stretched across Europe. We had Invisible Workers, which was an investigation by Lighthouse Reports, The Spiegel, Mediapart, and Euronews, which looked into working conditions on European farms. And finally, we had Luanda Leaks, which was another one coordinated by the ICIJ, and this one was on offshore money coming out of Angola. So it was a really great shortlist. As I say, very, very different types of investigation. We were really impressed by them all. I will now announce the first one that we picked. And this was a story that we thought was, especially in a year when most people's attention has been on coronavirus, it was really important to remember the terrible stories about the abuses of rights of migrants, and particularly child migrants. And so we decided to give one of our awards to Lost in Europe, which was the collaboration between Belgium, Italy, Netherlands, UK, and we were really impressed and saddened by the results of this investigation.
Very, very impressive shortlist that you have shared with us. Indeed, I can imagine, especially for you as the chair of the jury, that it was quite a difficult selection to come up with the so-called winners. I think all of them are winners. All of them who produce such high-quality piece of journalism are winners. But as it is, we only have 3 prizes, and thank you for awarding the first one. Now, if I'm not mistaken, we have the winner. We have the winner online to receive this virtually anyway. Obviously, you're not here in person for the most obvious reasons to take it into reception, but certainly this will be coming to you both. Let's hear from the winners.
Thank you, IJ4EU, for giving us firstly a chance to do this investigation and now reward us for it. It's really unexpected, and it's really an honor to get this. Our words are just of pride, proud of our team of investigative journalists. We grow by the speed of trust, but we are now with 23 journalists in Europe. It's too long to name them all, but I'll do that by the countries. We are in Greece, Romania, Lithuania, Croatia, Belgium, Switzerland, Italy, Germany, and the Netherlands, and UK. This research is very special for us because we investigated how Vietnamese minors were disappeared within Europe after registration. And we learned 3 things: how vulnerable children are in trafficking, and that they are actually exploited, and that our journalistic ethics must be of a very high standard. We seriously need to take the disappearances from reception centers into account, even when the authorities sometimes make us believe otherwise. Plus, we saw how valuable a joint cross-border investigation is, because the criminal organizations that are behind this do not respect those borders. So we need to work together for that. Within this investigation, we worked with the 4 countries. You already named them. I would like to add the names of the investigative journalists with that. From Belgium, we have Christophe Cleriks. He published in KNAK. Dorentina Islamai, she was from VRT. Roland Termote and Wouter Wause, thank you. They published in the Standard. The trafficking of Vietnamese minors in Germany was investigated by Adrian Bartocha and Jan Wiese from RBB and ARD. And in the UK, we had Ismaël Arnash. It's a pleasure to work with you. He published in The Guardian. And we have Huub Jaspers and Sanne Terlinge. They published from Argos. And I would like to give a special thanks to this last person, Sanne Terlinge. Sanne, you are the mastermind of behind this all. And I and many people in this team, we are very proud to work with you. The award is a team effort, but we owe this investigation to you. Thank you, Sanne, and thank you, the rest of the team. Thank you all.
Well, huge congratulations to you for the very fine work that you have produced. Well deserved. This prize, of course, which is waiting for you. I'm sure the IJ4EU will get it to you in some shape or form physically. Now, we talk so much about your documentary. Of course, for those who may not be
Handel met Vietnamese kinderen in Europa.
Man hat mir nicht gesagt, welche Arbeit und wie lange, nur dass es nach Deutschland geht.
Die sind klein, so 40, 50 Kilo Maximum.
Diese jungen Menschen mussten schreckliche Erfahrungen machen.
Man kann das so bezeichnen, es ist letztlich moderne Sklaverei.
In Wahrheit standen diese Kinder unter enormem Druck, denn sie müssen ja die Schulden an die Menschenhändler bezahlen.
Een gezamenlijk onderzoek van RBB, Argos en Lost in Europe.
As an international TV presenter, I've had my share of live hiccups. That seems to be one of them. It's all good. We're in good company. We're in Leipzig. It's cold outside. It's bearable here. So, looking at my tech team, we neither seem to have Nasira or Andre or the winner. Is that correct?
Well, almost.
There you go. Now I'm hearing someone. Who is this?
This is Andre Royek.
Andre.
Yes, I am. I haven't heard you for the last 5 minutes, so I'm sure you pretty much said whatever I am supposed to say. I cannot...
I tried to call upon you a few times, that is correct, but now that I have you online, let me make full use of you. I already took away a bit the suspense, but at the end of the day, you were a jury member and this should be your task. Tell us who won the second prize and why.
So I actually will not tell you who won the second prize. The winner will be announced by Nasira Al-Muaddam in a second. I will just say this, that the second award is really the sign of times. The recipient discovered through painstaking international cross-border research a network of fraudulent transactions aimed to cover up theft of public funds by corrupt politicians, plural. Now this sounds familiar, doesn't it? We have seen this before, and we have heard these kind of situations before, way too often. Yet this group of people, all 40 of them, in 17 countries, managed to publish in 19 media outlets the results of their work almost 2 years ago. The results had a positive impact. They impacted the institutions in question. So kudos to them, and I want Nasira to reveal the secret.
Indeed, we all want that. It would be lovely to hear from her. Nasira, are you with us now? No, it doesn't seem to be that way. So at the end of the day, I think we gave it enough of a shot. So we tried repeated times. But
I am here.
yes, is this?
This is Nasira, yes.
What a lovely treat to hear your voice. It almost seemed like I discovered gold after some time here. So we've been eagerly waiting for you impatiently because as a jury member, of course, and we're very eager to find out from you who won the second prize of the evening.
Yeah, and I'm very glad to announce you that the Impact Award winner is Troika Laundromat.
Wonderful, applause, and perhaps as a jury member, can you tell us what intrigued you about this particular piece of journalism?
Yes, for sure. As all the other member juries say, that we were all impressed by the work of the investigations, very, very impressed. But with the Troika Laundromat, I was really impressed about the level of disclosures and the work on the datas. There was 1,300,000 banking transactions from more than 230,000 companies. So it's a huge work on the data. So I was very impressed about this work. And there's also impressed about the significant efforts to build a reachable information with all the interactive graphics online. There was a great exposure of the work published in 19 European and non-European media outlets, Andrea said it before, and a great impact also with the creation of an anti-money laundering watchdog by the European Parliament. So very, very pleased to announce this winner award, and very, very glad to give this award tonight.
Indeed, and I believe we have the proud winner with us. Tell us, this is your prize. How are you feeling?
Hi, I'm actually feeling amazing. Troika Laundromat was by far the biggest work of my life, and I'm extremely happy, and I want to share the happiness with the entire team. Thanks to all the guys from UCCRP, thanks to all the guys who worked on the story from across Europe. This was an amazing collaboration, and there's one particular thing I want to stress. A lot of the work we did with Troika Laundromat would have been impossible without the work previously done by Roman Anin and his team in Russia. As many of you know, Roman's flat has been raided by FSB, so was his office, and now he's being targeted by a very dodgy government probe. So this award, the honor and the thanks and all of our support goes to Roman Anin. Hold on, guys.
Huge congratulations also from our side here in Berlin. I don't know if you can see it quite clearly. This is your award. It'll get to you in some shape or form, no doubt. And of course, once again, stressing the collaborative nature and effort that was put into this work, of which we will take a quick look at now in shape of a short clip.
This is Troika Dialogue, once Russia's premier investment bank. And this was Troika's president, Ruben Vardanyan, a Russian-Armenian businessman who is known for his friendly relationships with the West. Publicly, Troika was a powerful financial institution led by one of Russia's most progressive businessmen. Behind the scenes, the bank was devising a hidden system of offshore companies that helped Russia's elites launder money, hide their assets, and evade the law. Here is how Troika's laundromat worked. Troika established 3 offshore companies in the British Virgin Islands. These 3 companies paid formation agents to establish dozens of other companies to funnel the money out of Russia. Money flowed between these companies in a coordinated network. Many of the transactions were disguised as fake trade contracts and loans. This system allowed corrupt politicians and organized crime to buy luxury goods with complete anonymity. To make this transfer of money possible, Troika needed a bank that would turn a blind eye to its dubious financial transactions. Enter Ukio Bankas, a Lithuanian bank that shuffled millions of dollars through Troika's system before it was closed by regulators. Troika also relied on unwitting proxies to obscure the identity of the shell company's real owners. Reporters spoke to this man, an Armenian construction worker, who was unaware that his signature appears on financial agreements worth more than $70 million in the laundromat. So who was benefiting from this multi-billion-dollar network? You might recognize some of the names in this cast of characters. Companies affiliated with Sergei Roldugin, a cellist and alleged proxy of Putin, received $69 million from the pipeline. The family of Vladimir Ochikov, the former governor of the Samara region of Russia, used money from the pipeline to purchase a $16.6 million property in Spain. Vardanyan himself used $3.2 million from the pipeline to pay his credit card and his children's school fees in London. These names are just the tip of the iceberg. Reporters found more than 75 companies and hundreds of millions of dollars connected to the Troika network. When reporters spoke to Vardanyan, he said he couldn't be aware of all of Troika's transactions and that his bank acted legally. There is no definitive proof that Vardanyan knew of Troika's scheme, and he has not been accused of wrongdoing by authorities. But by pulling back the curtain on this scheme, we see how Troika allowed powerful people to move their vast wealth offshore for their own gain, at the detriment of the countries they live in, and the quality of life for everyday citizens.
Indeed, a very, very intricate story, intricate web to untangle, and therefore huge congratulations to all the journalists who were involved in this documentary in Troika Laundromat. Thank you so much for your work. Thank you, of course, Nasira, for announcing the winner. And now we go on, last but certainly not least, to the third prize of the evening. And this time I'm quite relieved to already see one of the speakers with us. It's always a good sign when the moderator already knows someone is lined up. It is Teresa Ribeiro, of course. She's the OSCE's representative on freedom of media. Lovely to have you with us. We're supposed to also have with us Christian Jensen, editor-in-chief of Politiken. I don't see him quite yet. Maybe he'll join us in just a bit. But in the meantime, Teresa, tell us who won the third prize of the evening.
Thank you very much. And I'm very, very happy to announce that the third winner is the Daphne project. It's a great example of collaborative cross-border investigative journalism, continuing the work of Daphne Caruana Galizia, the Maltese investigative journalist who paid the highest price for her journalistic work. Today, in times of growing disinformation and distrust in the media, this kind of work is perhaps more important than ever. But Christian, I think you are here with us, so can you please say something?
Let's see if we have Christian Jensen, the editor-in-chief of Politiken, with us. Christian, can you hear us? Is your mic turned on? Is your camera turned on? Are you joining us? Nope, doesn't seem to be that way, Teresa.
Okay, I will go on. Just unfortunately, it's also as dangerous as ever, the investigative journalism, with journalists who unveil the sometimes sordid relations between politics and big money, receiving countless threats and oftentimes face very serious legal repercussions. Like Daphne Caruana Galizia herself, who faced over 40 libel lawsuits filed by companies, government officials, and individuals, described by her son Matthew as a never-ending type of torture. And like Jan Kuciak, the Slovak journalist who was killed in 2018 after investigating tax fraud by several businessmen with connections to top-level Slovak politicians. We need the work of these brave people who unveil the uncomfortable truths that keep our authorities accountable and fight against possible corrupt elements that undermine and erode our democracies. Therefore, we need to ensure that media can do their work safely. We need to be clear that there can be no impunity for the ones who threaten or attack our media. And we need awards like this one to honor such great projects like Daphne Project, working relentlessly to keep unveiling truth in the name of a journalist who gave her life for this cause.
Well deserved indeed. And thank you, Teresa, for providing an insight and overview of the Daphne project. Now let's hear, of course, from the proud winners. Who's with us? Please turn on your camera and your microphone so that we can hear and see you. Of course, we want to see your face, your lucky face, your happy face, now that you've won. Well deserved. Take it away, please.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. It's great to be with you. I would like, first of all, to thank IG4IU for this award and to have supported Forbidden Stories and the Daphne project for so long. For those who didn't know Daphne, she was a prominent Maltese journalist investigating corruptions at the highest state level in Malta. and she was killed on the 16th of October 2017 in a car bomb. And after her murder, a group of 45 journalists from 15 countries decided to investigate her murder and try to continue her work. So I would like to thanks all of them tonight, and perhaps I can name some of them because some are part of this conference. So Juliette Garside from The Guardian, Jacob Borg from Times of Malta, Bastian and Frédéric Obermeier from Süddeutsche Zeitung, Stephen Gray from Reuters, Anne Michel and Jean-Baptiste Chastan from Le Monde, and of course there are many others. And I have a special thought tonight to Matthew, Paul, and Andrew, the sons of Daphne. Since the assassination of their mother, they have fought every day to get the truth and to obtain justice. And I think they are a true inspiration. Thank you.
No, thank you for the very, very important work and light that you have shed throughout the Daphne project. May her death not be in vain, indeed. Thank you so much, and huge congratulations. This is your prize, and thank you, Teresa, for setting it all up for us. Thank you so much, and all the best. Of course, before we go, for those who may not have seen the Daphne project, let's have a quick look.
In Malta, the emotion is immense. Thousands of people gather outside the church during her funeral. This is the first time that a journalist has been killed in a car bomb attack in the European Union. In Strasbourg, the President of the European Parliament welcomed Daphne Caruana Galizia's husband and sons, Matthew, Paul, and Andrew. Daphne, as everyone called her in Malta, became an icon. In her blog Running Commentary, she had reported on Maltese political life. This blog had overtaken all the traditional newspapers in the country. It was read by more than 300,000 of the 400,000 people living on the island.
She represented the voice of truth in Malta. It was our first source of information. She was exposing things that the government was trying its best to cover up.
She was relentless, she was fearless. There was nothing they could do to stop Daphne.
Daphne was known for her investigations into corruption at the highest state level. Her main target was the ruling Labour Party and its Prime Minister, Joseph Muscat. A few months before her death, she had uncovered the existence of several offshore companies owned by some members of the government.
If she wanted to call somebody a crook, a thief, a robber, a liar, a corrupt politician, she would do so.
She was feared. No one wanted to get on the wrong side of Daphne.
When I was circling the car, I just thought, those bastards. She was obviously killed because of something that she had written about. They just killed her. That was the only way.
Who ordered the assassination of Daphne Caruana Galizia? Why did they want to silence her? What disturbing investigations was she working on?
That was a clip, of course, from the Daphne project. Surprise for you. We actually have one more prize up our sleeve. So this evening, not 3 winners, but 4 winners actually will be announced. And for that, please welcome back Lutz Kinkel, who kicked off today's session, today's conference. Lutz, tell us what's behind the 4th prize.
Thank you very much, Ali. This is really surprising, and this is probably the first prize award that I'm attending, at least, that is extended on the fly. So we had 3 prizes, but we have now a 4th one. Also, the 4th one is connected with some prize money. It's 5,555 euros. This money is also not only meant as an award and as a motivation, but also as money to keep on working. I think every investigative journalist is badly in need of some financial means because, as we all know, the investigations are costly. So, yeah, well, we have this prize, and I will add this to the 3 ones, and I will tell you now.
Of course.
Who gets it? Well, this is one more investigation that is led by OCCRP, sorry, and the investigation is called Fraud Factory. Fraud Factory. It's a criminal group in Kiev that is targeting elderly people to cut them off their fortune. More concrete, it is the Milton Group offering fake investments in bitcoins and stealing the money from their clients. A lot of them are pensioners and they lost everything. The whistleblower that made this story possible said, the instruction he got every morning was to squeeze out the customer until the last cent. This story, and we will see a video also about the story, has everything that you wish from investigative journalism. You have a whistleblower that really took a high risk to reveal the facts. You have a global impact because this group in Kiev was working with clients all over the world, and you have a follow the money trail. It is, and this is how I would sum it up, a classical cross-border investigative journalism piece at its best. Have a look at the video and see this investigation. Afterwards.
Vi utrustar vår källa med en dold högupplöst kamera med ljudupptagning. Under loppet av flera månader och med stora risker för sin egen säkerhet samlar han dagligen in information och skickar över till Dagens Nyheter.
Från en hyrd lägenhet på andra sidan gatan ser vi in genom fönstren och kan iaktta Milton Groups säljare.
Företagets lokaler är hårt bevakade med övervakningskameror i alla rum. Alla som ska in på kontoret stoppas och tvingas lämna ifrån sig sina privata mobiltelefoner. Men den dolda kameran fortsätter att spela in.
On the instruction every morning, the order was to squeeze the money from the clients till the last cent.
This was the video, you heard the quote, squeeze them out until the last cent. I hope we have the winners with us. If that's the case, please turn on your mics and please turn on your camera so that we can virtually give you the prize and have a word by you. If that's not the case, I can only say thank you. And this is a really impressive piece, and I'm glad that I had the opportunity to present that. Right now, I see Matthias Karlsson, right? he's with us. So Matthias, well, congratulations, and the floor is yours. We can see you and hopefully hear you also in a few seconds. Matthias, can you hear me? I cannot hear you. Maybe you have to unmute your microphone.
Indeed, the microphone, a classic during the pandemic. Matthias, we saw you quite clearly. We just couldn't hear you. So do turn on your camera and, more importantly, turn on your microphone, because obviously we want to hear from you. Let's give it one more try.
Yeah. Let's try again.
It looked good. It looked good. Unfortunately, we couldn't hear anything.
Here he is.
Seems to be back
again.
Matthias, turn on your camera and your microphone.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Wonderful.
Yeah, now we hear you.
Sorry, I was totally unprepared. Thank you so much.
Matthias, could you tell us a little bit about the investigation? It's really impressive, and it's obviously also a global investigation because, well, these people, the Milton Group, so-called Milton Group, had clients all over the world, not only in Europe, but all over the world. You picked up some Swedish examples, right?
Yeah.
But the clients, so-called clients, were all over the world.
Yeah, exactly. What these the whistleblower we had inside the Milton Group, he managed to extract data from the client database from Milton and from the phones they used to call the victims. So he was sending me via WhatsApp the contact lists from the sales managers' phones, and we were then distributing these numbers for each country to from South America and in Europe and in America as well. We had a few victims. So this was a really big cooperation with verifying his story through the victims that talked to us and about how they were being scammed in exactly the same way. I mean, the stories we heard, from the far northern Sweden and from all over Europe was almost identical how they were, scammed.
Could you tell us just one or two sentences? What is the Milton Group doing today? Is it still existing?
What I understand is that they rebranded it a bit and they changed names. But as far as I can tell, I mean, they're still at it, and there is plenty of these scams going around still. And in the follow-up investigations we did, we also revealed how big internet companies like, for example, Google, sell advertisements to promote this kind of scams with the celebrity fake ads that I guess everyone have seen them sometimes at Facebook or elsewhere. And so I think one of the biggest insights after this story was that how difficult it is for the law enforcement to actually get to the responsibles, even though they had the whistleblower that before the story was published, he left Ukraine and he's in a witness protection program now, and he gave all the material to the Swedish police, and that in turn shared it with the European prosecutor's office. And but still, 1 year after this, there's not a single charge. No one is even close to getting arrested. So yeah, it's really sad.
There's something left to do.
Yeah.
Thank you for this investigation. It is really impressive. We are very proud of. I think this prize is more than deserved. You are the fourth winner of this evening. I mean, the surprise winner.
Yeah,
the more lucky
thank
we
you
are.
so much.
And I think we are ending the ceremony here.
Indeed. I sense a sequel coming for sure, part 2. Ladies and gentlemen, this not only wraps up the Impact Award ceremony, the IJ4EU Impact Award ceremony. Huge congratulations again to all winners, but actually it wraps up the very first day of the Uncovered conference. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you took a lot with you and out of this. I certainly did. Yeah, Lutz, all that is left to do is tell our viewers that please be back here. This only wraps up day 1. We'll be back here tomorrow for day 2, again, starting time at 2 p.m. Looking forward to seeing you all back here. Have a good evening or a good day, depending on from where you're joining us. Here in Leipzig, it's me, it's Ali Aslan and Lutz Kinkel, wishing you all the best and hoping to see you back here at 2 p.m. All the best.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Cheers.
Cheers.